with the native Zoom recording now that we're going to jump into actual questions. So I'll share my screen and we'll just go through some questions together and discuss them and see what we think. And it's a good way to talk about why the questions are asking what they're asking, what are they actually asking, and how do you approach a thing like this? We'll just play a bit, and you get to see what this what the app actually looks like. But really, that's besides the point. So let me share the screen. Here we go. All right, can I get a thumbs up if you see my screen? Are there any issues? Okay, cool. Yeah, so all the features, for exam prep and otherwise. But we are going to be focused. There's like a coaching log and the session evaluations and role play and all kinds of fun things you can do. But we are focusing on exam prep. And you can study for ACC or PCC on here. We're doing PCC today. A bunch of study guides and resources here. And then there are different practice modes. We're going to just jump through the shuffled practice mode as opposed to doing a 3-hour full simulation. And then there are AI practice questions if you run out of practice mode. So let's just get into it. What do we have here first? So I'm thinking, why don't we read through it independently and use the chat to write down what you think should be best and worst answers, and then we'll plug it in, see what kind of see how we do.
Annie, is there any way to enlarge your screen?
Are you missing?
That's better.
Is that better? Okay, good.
Yes, thank you.
Great. All right, so what's your instinct? I wonder if I could do this as a poll. Interesting. I think that'll take too long. Okay, we've got some votes for A and C. A for best. Let someone else join me too. All right, so let's go with A and C. Because we've got critical mass. All right. Well done. Hi, Jackie. Thanks for joining. We're just going through some questions. So, so real quick, what made you think of A as best and C as worst? What was your logic?
For me, the first one for A being the best because you're acknowledging, and that's sort of one of those key trigger words, is you're acknowledging where they're coming from, and that's sort of the key for me. The worst I picked was C was because you're making an assumption that carrying the team's emotion is the hardest to sustain. So you're making an assumption that that's the hardest. It might be something that's different. So that was my rationale around it.
Mm. Yeah. Anyone else have a different take?
Yes, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I thought for the A is the best because there's acknowledgement and we're asking the question. So we're taking it for this client center, not the coach center. So it makes explore and think about it. For the C, it's the worst because it ignore the reaction of the client. So when she said like sort of, as if we did not pay attention to what she said. And this is one, so ignoring. And the second, the coach focused on only carrying the team's emotion.
Mm.
So he's leading the conversation. It's like coach centered, not client centered. I don't know if it's right.
Yeah, it looks like it is. Well, at least according to here. And if you're not familiar with how this works, there's a whole breakdown that explains according to the competencies why one is better than the other, or at least it tries to get close. But as you said, it looks like emotional inquiry, so it's a little tricky because it's like, oh, well, it seems like you could be looking into it, but really you're doing some assuming. It's coach centered versus client centered, as you said. It's what is for me, I thought of this. So this acronym is one when I came up with, in that it's really about that mindset. The best answer is going to be the one that is the most client centered. It's kind of the highest, most mature, no problem, Adrian. The highest sort of most mature presence as a coach, which is leaning into the client's world. And conversely, the hinge acronym kind of breaks down what are all the things that would make you behave more as a consultant, as an advisor, somebody who's judging and assuming, and all the things that we're not really supposed to do as coach. I mean, our highest calling as a coach is to just be that mirror for the client and not make it about ourselves. All right, so let's move on to another one. Let's see what we got. So what it looks like we're doing here is reading through and using the chat to share our answers. So we're getting some best C and worst D opinions. Okay, that seems to be our majority so far. Maybe A is best and D is worst. Interesting. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go with the majority one. Yep. Okay. So again, this is, it all comes down to, what is the point of all of these competencies? And in my view, you don't have to memorize all of them. I mean, it's good to be familiar, but you don't need to know, oh, well, this was 4.4 and that's why, the answer is right. It's more like, what is the energy of the question? And which one goes up toward higher level coaching and which one goes down toward client centered versus coach centered. I can see why
Okay,
A would
may
be.
I,
Sure.
yeah, may
Go ahead.
okay. So now I see why C is the best because it's focusing on the right now, but A is the future reality. So the current reality is more important as a PCC credential exam, better than the future reality. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean A is not bad, because
I know, but it's going to the next. Instead, C is talking what she needs right now. So we're focusing on the now is better than focusing on what's next. We need to understand the now before we go to the next.
Mm.
I'm trying to just use the experience that I'm passing through with the study. So it's always say that focusing on the now as a PCC coach is much important than focusing on the next. So if I'm wrong, please explain.
Yeah, and so if the now is what is in the client's mind, right? If we don't want to focus on the now because we think it's important, right? So in the A part, you're sort of deciding what's important instead of the client's experience. And 6.4 is notices and acknowledges and explores the client's emotions, energy shifts, so it's what's going on with them. And if you start taking over and say, I'm going to start telling you about your strengths and we're going to do this now. So that's not really their agenda. That's you trying to rescue them. Even though it's empathetic, we're not bad people because, you want to help them with their strengths, but it is more of an intervention than meeting them where they're at. And then D is sort of the worst offender in that regard. You're making it about yourself. Well, here's what I've observed. We're not consultants. We don't tell them what we've observed in that way. And so I want to check with you all whether, what would be useful here. We have these indicators. These are short. There's no real shortcut. I think the idea is that this sort of helps you align with that mentality. If a question is, it's not like, oh, it didn't check these boxes and therefore it's right or wrong. It's more like, let me get oriented using these ideas. Is there anything about share what you have observed in similar situations? Is that really following the lead? Is that opening the space? Is it curious? Does it really feel like it's in that direction? Or is any of this stuff going on? Right? Where are you kind of leaning? And it is subtle because some of these answers are not unreasonable. They're just kind of leaning in one way or the other. Who thought that taking an exam like this would be a spiritual journey? All right, let's go for it. Okay, so it looks like D and C are a majority here, so let's try that. Huh. Let's see how it's thinking about this. Now, as I said, we can disagree, and this isn't the official exam, but what's important is just to start recognizing the patterns. Ironically, what are your thoughts?
Um, I I think asking the client to start over again, it's it's a waste of time for the coaching session. Like, because indeed they acknowledge the interruption, okay, and ask him to take it from the beginning in his own words. It's like the client has to repeat himself. So I don't know if that's why I didn't pick D. I picked C as the best, but I'm wrong anyway.
So you went with
I
A.
picked B for the sorry, I went with a B and D and C, like everybody, but we all wrong on the worst. I thought B was the best because when you apologize, it's like you're having this coaching mindset, as a coach mindset, like you accept the reaction of the client and you go with it. So that's why me being apologizing for the interruption first, because we don't have to interrupt the client unless we take permission from the client to interrupt him if he is a talkative person. So now I'm confused. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyone else? Where do you agree or disagree?
May I say? I was hesitating, like speaking about the worst option. I was hesitating between A and C. The only thing, actually, I was kind of like, okay, A maybe is the worst thing, but then the word internally confused me because internally it means that I'm what I thought, that I'm like thinking to myself, like no one see my thoughts, no one see my reaction. And I thought that it's not the worst thing. So I thought that continue the conversation is more kind of like I showed that, oh yeah, okay, I got you, but let's go on. You know what I mean? And this is why I kind of like I'm a little bit confused why A is the worst option. The only thing I think, it's just my opinion, that maybe if I congratulate myself internally, I kind of not in the process anymore. You know what I mean? That I'm not focusing on the client. That's why it is the worst. So I don't know. That was my logic. So I'm a little bit disagree, but who am I? I'm just a student.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I disagree too. I think we need to change this a little bit. But I think the logic here, which is I think useful regardless, is that A, they're saying is worse. So in an exam situation, if there's an option that is entirely focused on what the coach's experience is, well, the lesson is this is not about us and how we feel and our interpretations and am I congratulating myself? Because if that's what your answer is, then you're essentially you've completely lost sight of the client. You're not focusing on them, on serving them, on helping them reflect, on understanding what's going on with them. You're like, oh, good for me. Now this is about me all of a sudden, right? So that's pretty bad, right? That's not the mentality we want to be in. So I can see why, why we ended up with A as a worst answer. And then yeah, D versus B is interesting. My instinct would have been B actually. And so what's tricky here, I think, is that the way it's written is ask him to take it from the beginning. So I think that's kind of a language thing that needs to be fixed that I'm going to edit actually, because asking him to take it from the beginning is okay. The coach is deciding what happens next, as opposed to, oh, whoops, we got off track. Let's get back on track. I'm going to hand it back to you. You're the client. You decide what's next. So that would be my sort of view on it. But yeah, I mean, okay. But regardless, I think the idea of leaning from coach to client is still really the lesson here for me. Does anyone have any objections or anything else they would agree or disagree with? No? Jackie, what do you think? Haven't heard from you.
My English is not the best, but I can understand better than speak.
Okay.
I think I have not approved my exam for 3 times. I am going to be the fourth time next week, I think. So the most difficult for me is to understand the worst option, not the best. And now I can see clearly that why is the A instead of the C, because it's the all the coach mind, the coach recognition, not the client recognition. And it's tricky because in the C you can think that is the worst, and that's that happen in the exam, no, all the time. How can you make this difference in 2 minutes?
Yeah.
No,
Jackie, are you taking the exam in Spanish or another language?
in Spanish 2 times and in English once,
Ah.
a pilot one.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious how the language differences, and anyway, that's a longer conversation.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I think A is just completely ignoring the client. It's me, 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 me. And that's not our job. Okay. Let's try to get through a few more. Let's wait for a couple more answers. Anybody else have an instinct here? Okay, mixed bag. All right, so we have a few A's and B's here. Let's try that. Ooh, interesting. Okay, so what are we learning from this? Let's see, how can I maybe I'll call that. So which is the most client-centered and which is the least? Which is the most coach-centered? Part of our work as coaches is to be present with the client, meaning 6.6, noticing trends in the client's behaviors, noticing. So if you know the competency specifically, when something happens in front of you, your job as a coach is to call it out, is to share the observation, and notice it and share. Two different competencies. But the noticing it is one. Something's going on with this client. I have to be aware of that. And the other one is, I noticed the thing, and then you reflect it. You go, hey, this happened. You know, what is your interpretation? Give it back to the client. So I think A is a pretty good example of that. And it says, reflect the pattern. Hey, you're not inventing this. You're not making interpretations. You're just saying, I have observed a pattern and here it is. What do you think? In the question, it clearly says she keeps repeating her mother, you know, over and over. You go, hey, that's a thing that's happening. What do you make of it? And the B versus D in the worst answer. I'm curious, Nina, when you chose the D as best, how were you thinking about it?
I don't know, maybe it's my Russian mentality, but
Mm.
you know, like if I can see, so I try not to decide anything for people, and if I can see something that kind of can be an issue, I'm trying to ask like extra questions to be sure that I understood the situation correctly. And then when people kind of not directly tell me like, oh yeah, you're right. So, and when I kind of like sure that yeah, it's not just my imagination, then I can say, hey, if you don't mind, I can share something, and then I reflect the pattern. For example, in this situation, that's why, like me personally, I think I would do that. That I would ask like extra questions before I show what I noticed.
Mm.
So that's why I decided that it's kind of like the best option. I'm a little bit confused, but again, it's just me.
Yeah.
And I still, you know, I know that I was thinking that A is the best way like to work in this situation, but I was kind of like choosing between A and D, and like, what should I do? What would I do? And I was like, okay, I would ask more questions before I will go to A. You know what I mean? And I failed.
Yeah, and
So
that's one
that,
of
but
the
that was my logic.
no, I hear that, you know, and that's one of the tricky things where, you know, the test is about what does the ICF say we have to do, as opposed to what would we do in a session ourselves. You know, we might want to scratch the surface and ask more questions and understand, you know, and something like that. But according to ICF competencies, when there is something like this thrown in your face with the you know, a pattern that keeps resurfacing, the responsibility is to notice it and share it. Notice and share, you know, and the thing about D, and you know, maybe it's just the way it's written that's confusing, and you know that makes sense. But I would say it comes down to this: the coach's pre-held conclusion.
But
So
why B is
asking,
the worst? I'm sorry for interruption.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I just don't understand why B is the worst.
Worse is D.
Oh, D. Oh,
D.
shoot. Ignore me. Ignore me.
Okay. Okay. B is close because it's a kind of like, oh, you know, I'm gonna push this aside to a therapist and not even deal with it. There's nothing wrong with noticing and suggesting therapy if it's outside the scope of coaching, but in this case, there's no acute, we're not, it's not an ethical violation we're dealing with here. She hasn't said I'm traumatized, I'm suicidal, I don't know, any of these big red flags where we need to say, okay, this is clearly not my territory. She's talking about a relational pattern and she brings up her mother, right? It's not egregious. So while it's not ideal to shove it aside, it's sort of in between. Whereas D, I think the logic is it's become about the coach. That's really what it always comes back to. I have an idea and therefore I need to uncover it by figuring out and being the detective about where it came from and ask the questions, and you're steering the conversation for the client. B and D are both bad. I think you could probably argue either one. But if what it comes down to is client versus coach centered, then D is really the coach taking the lead. Yeah. Oh, you don't have to raise your hand. Just go for it.
Okay, Danny, yeah, I'm still confused between the B and the D, and my interpretation is the follow. When you suggest is worse than when you ask. And when you ask a series of open questions, it's like you're being curious, and the coach has to be curious about things. So it's for me, it's not logic. And if I'm in an exam and I see these answers, the verb suggest goes directly into the worst. It won't let me think about how asking open questions is going to be coach-centered and not client-centered. You know what I mean? Like as an exam. Yeah, and I don't know.
I think your
If you
instinct
can
is
help me how to think about it in a different way.
I think your instinct is perfectly right, and this isn't, it's not like I have all the real ICF questions, and I think on the exam you're probably going to be able to make that call effectively, and I think the way you're thinking about it makes a lot of sense. B is the coach sort of taking the agenda and pushing the client somewhere, and it's not great, especially because, so the reason it isn't the worst is because there is a reasonable question of like, is this within the scope? It's like an ethics thing. I think that's probably how this is, the logic is, let's get test takers to think about when is it fully the coach's agenda, or when is it fully the client's agenda versus when does it go into the territory of coach's agenda. That's the logic here. Hopefully on the real exam, the distinction is clear enough between examples that they wouldn't necessarily make a competition between these two answers. But I think the way you're thinking about it is the right logic. Asking is more curious, suggesting is more directive. Typically, that's a fair way of thinking about it. But I think in every question, what I've heard from a lot of people who've taken the test is that sometimes it's pretty subtle, and just because it says ask or just because it says acknowledge or reflect, that you can't necessarily assume for sure that that's the right answer.
100%, you're right. It's not always the verb that concludes if it's right or wrong, but here it's obvious. And the suggest is way worse than.
Yeah, it's a fair debate, you know. I'm kind of in between. I can understand why D is bad, because you've become the expert who needs to seek out the answer. And in terms of the competencies, I think it could be argued that it's worse when the coach starts behaving like the expert. When a coach starts behaving like they know what to do and they know where to go, and they start to impose that. B is a little cleaner. It's more like, I have a question about scope, and like maybe this isn't here. So like, you're not like really pushing the client to think in a particular way. You're just saying, oh, maybe this is a boundary for me in my practice. So anyway, I would say definitely don't overthink it. I would say just focus on that distinction. Which one goes in this direction or that direction? That's really the mentality that I feel is most important to practice, you know, just getting back into that almost mental zone. Yeah. All right. So I understand, you know, we had said 45 minutes. I want to respect your time. If you need to jump, for sure, do what you have to do. I can do one more question, and we'll call it from there, if that's okay with everyone. Tricky. Remember, this isn't the real test, so just take a guess. You know, what is your instinct? Okay. All right, we have some D's and C's here, so let's check it out. Oh, we're kind of split. Okay. Okay. So for this one, D and C. What are your thoughts on what this is actually testing and what makes it right or wrong?
I could share maybe. Sorry, I also came a bit late, jumping from meeting to meeting.
No
For
problem.
me, I chose the best to be D because for me it's ethics of a coach, which is the main central point of this, not discussing other clients, relationship with the other clients and details and maintaining confidentiality. And I think D avoids confirming, but also very gently continues the path with a new client and establishing or not a new relationship without going further and without also blaming the client or without overexposing it. While C has for me the typical, you confirm that, yeah, X person, Sarah is my client, la la la, and it is direct breach of the coach's confidentiality by the ICF rules, at least in my understanding. And it also still exposes by acknowledging the relationship itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a hard rule, you know. Do you break confidentiality or not? If
You don't.
you don't, right? And Sarah, there's no information here in this context that Sarah has given you permission to discuss it, or you know, you have some more understanding. So this person is talking about Sarah with the assumption, and you're not allowed to do that. The other ones are sort of in between, like, yeah, you're kind of skirting around, but maybe implying that you do work with Sarah, but it's not allowed. You know, again, in the real world, we might have more nuance. Like A is like, you know, attractive.
Exactly, because you are still in the discovery session or the chemistry section. So in the chemistry session, the coach needs to explain what is coaching and what is not. And
Yeah, and look,
that's why I choose A, for example. So it depends
that
on the
is the
situation
context.
where you are in the session.
Yeah, and we're supposed to, you know, it's our responsibility to explain what it is and what it isn't. So the competencies kind of fight against each other a little.
Also in A, when I don't confirm or deny about Sarah's experience, it doesn't mean that I'm confirming that Sarah is my client. So also I am respecting the confidentiality here.
Yeah.
So I'm very confused.
Yeah. It's subtle. Anyone else? Was anyone else drawn to A?
Can we have one more if everybody agrees?
Yeah, I was initially drawn to A as well because exactly what you're saying, Micheline. You know, there's nothing wrong with with explaining what coaching actually involves. However, there is a little hint of potentially implying something, and then also if we go beyond that, this is still a coaching client, and if you start thinking about how are you supposed to interact with people, if they said, you know, this is what coaching is, do you get into an argument with them? Are you demonstrating mature coaching, or are you now making it about how you communicate and what you think? So correcting the mischaracterization is a pretty aggressive move, you know, when the client comes and says something. So D, it says thank you, and you ask them what they're looking for. Exploring what they're looking for in a coach is now you can get to characterizing coaching in a way that is more coach-like. So the path to explaining what coaching is, you do it through them.
So here you're talking about the word mischaracterization as if I am defending what I know in coaching and not.
A little bit.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit. Again, I think your logic makes a lot of sense. We hope that when we take the exam, that the questions they get, my assumption, actually, I don't know, nobody knows. I don't know who knows how many real exam questions there are. I'm assuming there must be hundreds, you know, and every test is, you get a little bit of different ones here and there. Wendy, you're nodding your head. I know that you shared that opinion as well. And so you don't see the same questions, and you can hope that the ones that you get are ones that, you know, that allow you to make those clear distinctions. But from what I understand, sometimes they're not that clear, and it may be a difference of opinion about the interpretation of a competency. And the truth is, it's pretty subjective stuff a lot of the time. This isn't numbers and math, and, you know, we're not answering physics questions. We're answering questions that are about how do you interpret language. And so the person who wrote the question, you might disagree with them, and that's okay. I mean, it's not ideal.
But this is not allowing us to pass. That's the
Exactly.
issue.
You know, it
We need
is,
to
it's tricky.
understand. Yeah.
It's tricky. So, but I think if you're, I think your logic makes sense. It's just which way are you
But
going?
I'm not getting the right answers. So, or half of it.
It's just a millimeter of a little more client-centered or a little more coach-centered. So, well, look, we're almost at the top of the hour. So I think we need, I know we just had someone else join. Okay, I'm gonna just stop the share here and come back. I'm happy to do this again. You know, we can just keep doing more of these if it's useful. And, you know, if you weren't able to take full advantage, we can do it again each time, go through different questions and just try to, you know, set our brains in the direction of the logic. Again, we don't know what's going to show up on the exam. All we can do is get our minds sort of oriented with ICF competencies, coach versus client centered, and be able to breathe and recognize, what are they actually testing me on here? You know, what are they trying to, how are they really trying to, you know, screw me over in this moment, with which one is plausible, but just an inch away that is slightly more coach versus client, or slightly more true to the competencies. That's all we can really do. So any thoughts or you know, objections or anything you'd want to see differently?
I say, I would like to really just thank you, because it was really useful for me personally. And again, I can talk only for myself. And I can be honest with you guys that I visited a lot of such meetings, and this one, without any hesitation, was the best one. Seriously, for me personally. Again, I can't say for everyone, but for me personally, I do appreciate you, and thank you so much for your time. And I think that it can be really very useful to listen to other people's opinion, to see the questions. No one knows what we are going to see at the exam. Maybe we will read, I don't know, like one of the Edgar's Poe, where we don't know, right? But at least we can see how it works. We can see the logic, and it also can be very helpful for our job. And like, for example, as I said, like my Russian mentality, I would like to ask more questions, but according to ICF logic, like, stop asking, just if you see something, say something, right? So, and I think for me personally, it's really very useful. And if we can do it again, I'm in, like, for 100% in. So thank you so much again. And for me, it was really very interesting to see other people, to see, to hear other people's opinion. And again, I'm totally in if we're going to do it again. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate that, and thanks for explaining, you know, what about it is useful to you. That's I take the compliment. I'm excited. I really want to know why. Like, what helps and what doesn't. What is useful to you? What would be more useful also, so we can capitalize on that. You know, I mean, I wish I could wave a magic wand and get all the exam questions and we could actually do the real thing. But obviously we're not going to do that. I have to bribe someone or something. Anyway, Trevor, thank you so much.
I just want to add, you know, I got the course in Russian language,
Okay.
and because it's easy, because it's my native language. And for me, it's also useful because I can see English questions. I can see like native exam, let's call it native exam, yeah, and talk to like native speakers and to see their logic. Because again, as you said, sometimes we can look at the language differently. Like, for example, in Russian, we have the word complain, and it has actually a positive connotation. When I tell you, oh, how's it going? Complain. It means that I want to know how you feel. I'm really interested in what you're thinking. But in English, complain, it's kind of like not a positive connotation. You know what I mean? So when for me, it's really very useful that I can see it not in my native language, but in English language, and to hear what people can, you know, like how they can see it differently. So it's really very useful for me. So I don't know, maybe next time I can see something else, but for now this is what I can see. And thank you again. It's really, for me, it was really just a wonderful hour. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming. I'm happy to do it again next week. I think we could do it next week. I will send emails and you know, just be in touch if you want the link. I'll try to put it in a bunch of places. And if you don't hear from me, just let me know, and let me know what times work for you and stuff, and we'll try to accommodate. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a great weekend.
And you too.
Thanks,
Thank you.
and bye.
Bye bye.